Hello everyone. This video is about the LA riot incident. We saw that these things were coming, as expected. But they finally happened. Here's the main point. You need to understand Trump's anti-illegal immigration policy. At the border, he actually sent in the military and managed to secure the border. The number of new illegal immigrants coming to the U.S. has decreased, but he wants to expel illegal immigrants already inside the U.S. It's extremely difficult. Why is that? Because when you go to catch people, they just hide, they go underground. These people are in big cities, so it's really hard to figure out who's an illegal immigrant, because in the U.S., you don't need an ID card. So how do you prove someone is an illegal immigrant? Are you meant to make everyone raise their hand to report? And those illegal immigrants, they also have relatives and friends. They take them in. So what can you do? Basically, we really need to catch those large numbers of illegal immigrants. You're made, not the military or what the National Guard did, nor ICE to do it. It has to be the local police, people who are familiar with the local area. They're the only ones who can actually do it. As a result, in Trump's first 5 months, in the first few months, the number of illegal immigrants he simply deported was actually less than Biden's. Not to mention Obama. Obama actually deported the most people. Of course, Trump wasn't willing to accept that. To break into certain places in the city and catch people, it can't be used before going there. It wasn't allowed to arrest people. They were scared of scaring people, including religious sites and schools. And places like seniors' homes. You really shouldn't go to those places. This time, the ICE units raided LA to arrest people. What really triggered it? From what I saw in the news reports, the whole thing was really 4 people in LA, especially those of Mexican descent. The thing that made them angry was, near the schools, they were arresting parents picking up their kids. You know, the U.S. Constitution stipulates that all children must receive an education. Schools are not allowed to. Any child, no matter who you are, if you're in the U.S., you have to get an education. Schools are not allowed to ask whether or not a child is an undocumented immigrant. So, of course there are undocumented immigrants. Kids attend school, catch suspicious people at the door, sometimes right in front of the children. It scares the kids. That's what caused the uproar. You must understand why this caused such a reaction. They also arrested a union leader. There are 44 more people. They had already arrested a union leader and 44 people. The local people were extremely angry. ICE was in the fashion district of Los Angeles, at the Home Depot in Paramount City, near shopping malls, carrying out search warrant. They were there to arrest people. Some even waited outside the courthouse, not to arrest judges. Some even applied for refugee status in some cases. Go to the door to catch someone. These people were dressed in tactical gear, with masks covering their faces, and driving unmarked military vehicles. When people saw these kinds of people suddenly rushing out onto the street, arresting people, it was really frightening. First, you need to understand. According to statistics from U.S. Department of Justice, there have already been over 1,000 protesters. As a result, those people surrounded the federal ICE building and damaged ICE vehicles. Both people said that Hong Kong protesters are, without a doubt, the most polite, gentle, humble, and courteous. But when Americans protest, they burn garbage bins and burn cars, and then some people smash up shops. This always happens. Not this incident. It's like this with everything. It's U.S. because they have a lot of delinquent youth. There are more of those groups. All right. They surrounded the federal building, protested recently in the Paramount area, set garbage piles on fire, threw rocks at federal vehicles, burned the American flag, and set off fireworks. ICE officers wore bomb suits, protected from head to toe, wear a gas mask, using tear gas and flashbangs to disperse the crowd. This street, this area, you might think LA is huge, but it's never the whole of LA. It's always just one area. Just like Hong Kong in 2019, you know that too. You always followed it. There were just a few districts. And then they used concrete to smash police patrol cars. Of course, they set garbage piles on fire, burning garbage piles, just like Hong Kong in 2019, throwing Molotovs. Setting garbage piles on fire isn't to burn people. It's to stop the police from advancing. Create black smoke. You've to understand, some bad actors will take advantage of the situation, hitting a shop, steal. The population of Paramount is 50,000 Latinos. 82% are Hispanic or Latino. And aside from Mexico, they might come from other parts of Latin America, but they're all Hispanic. Of course, it's very likely that they have relatives or friends. Illegal immigration. Naturally, this causes fear. All of LA. About 40% are Latino, which is several million people. There are millions of people, so this is a really difficult issue to deal with. Let me tell you, why have successive U.S. governments been unable to handle these undocumented immigrants entering the country? Because it's a very tricky problem. I'm telling you, this is a really tough issue. Protesters are waving Mexican flags. ICE leaves Los Angeles. I saw people from the MAGA camp saying, these people on American soil are burning the American flag, waving the Mexican flag, and they should all be kicked out. But others say, hey, this used to be Mexico in the first place. The U.S. invaded. So you white people, why don't you leave? Why aren't you the ones leaving? Seriously, the name LA is actually Spanish. City of the Angels, Los Angeles. Why is it called LA? You tell me. Los Angeles. Explain it to me. That's Spanish. All these places were taken by force through invasion. So who do they really belong to? Other people were already here long before. The president of the Service Workers Union was arrested. They caught the union president. Of course, that's a serious issue. He's being held at a federal detention center. He's due next Monday. The protest went to Little Tokyo. Little Tokyo concentrates the Japanese community. They threw hard objects. That's how it started. They blocked the railway tracks. That's the easiest thing to do. They blocked the subway, the railway, and things like that. Because if there's something on the tracks, you can't pass. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, over a dozen people were arrested during the protests for obstructing law enforcement. They must have been on federal property, indeed. Doing things like graffiti, they confronted local residents. And the situation was tense. By Sunday, it was still ongoing. I'll talk about the outcome a bit later. On Sunday night, the riots escalated. Trump signed a memorandum deploying 2,000 National Guard soldiers to suppress the unrest. He exercised the powers granted under Chapter 10 of the U.S. Military Code. The federal government took over command of the California National Guard. Let me explain the legal perspective here. The National Guard is normally under the governor's authority. If someone in the state, if someone disrupts public order, it's the police who handle it, right? But now, here's the situation. The federal government. When can it intervene? This falls within the scope of state autonomy. There's one condition, which is when the law can't be enforced. There are 3 ways to handle this. Remember this. This is actually a constitutional issue. So what does it mean when the law can't be enforced? It means the police can't maintain control, and it descends into anarchy at the governor's request. And it must be at the governor's request. The National Guard can be deployed. That's the first rule. The second rule is called federalizing the National Guard. This means putting the National Guard under the authority. The president assigned him to protect federal property. You can't go out and maintain public order elsewhere. You are merely maintaining federal property. Right now, they're using this authority. This is authority they're using. Third, you have to declare a riot. You have to officially declare a riot in a certain area, and only then can you take action, without the governor's request. Only then can you deploy the National Guard or the military. Right now, there hasn't been a declaration of a riot. Yet Trump has deployed the National Guard, and even talked about deploying the Marine Corps. Deploying them like this has sparked constitutional controversy. Why doesn't Trump declare a riot? Because once a riot is declared, that is, the controversy over human rights would become even bigger, and it would trigger backlash across the country. Right now, there are 22 states protesting against Trump for infringing on states' autonomy. Well, back in 2020, Trump already wanted to deploy the military during the BLM movement, specifically. The troops refused to follow orders. The Department of Defense refused to follow orders because he hadn't declared a riot. And constitutionally, you can't use the military within the United States. At that time, the military refused to carry out the mission. Now that there's a new Secretary of Defense, of course, anything could happen, but no matter what. This is a huge constitutional controversy. Those National Guard troops are from California, from downtown LA, gathering outside detention facilities for undocumented immigrants. At first, they're just being used to protect federal facilities. But if they start sweeping the streets for people, then that's a huge problem. Let me explain it to you at the end. Why this controversy is so big. The White House press secretary said, the president has zero tolerance for violence against law enforcement agencies. The MAGA camp says, this is the law. We're enforcing the law. Law and order. You protest. You can't use violence. If you use violence, especially when it endangers federal law officers, then violence can be used in response. Any way can be used to handle it. That's what the supporters on that side are saying. The Marine Corps is on high alert. If the Marines are deployed, in principle, a riot must be declared. But once a riot is declared, the situation escalates. Historically, there have been instances since this law was enacted, about 12 times, when the National Guard was used. The most serious case was in 1992. The National Guard wasn't used for this. During the Eisenhower era, Johnson era, National Guard was deployed to escort black students to attend white schools, because white schools refused to admit black students. In 1992, it was because a white police officer who killed a black man was found not guilty, which sparked riots. You have to remember, of course, the same goes for BLM, but that time it wasn't used. Legal experts say you don't need riot laws. Active duty military personnel can't be involved, so the governor of New York said, if ICE acts like this, so high profile, it's like putting on a military uniform, fully armed, rushing into the downtown core, going to these places, arresting people at schools and other locations, causing panic in the community, deliberate provocation. He said the federal government isn't intervening because of a lack of law enforcement resources, but is intentionally doing things. I agree with that. Trump feels that if he doesn't take some action, hard to answer to many, because as a result he deported illegal immigrants, Ben Obama, several times less, and even fewer than Biden. How do you explain that? Because he came on stage. People started hiding, blending into the crowds. It's like asking you to pick out a few grains of sand from the beach. This is a very difficult thing among millions of people in the most populous states, the states with the most undocumented immigrants. These states' undocumented people are 30 to 40% of the population. This is a really tough issue to deal with. It's hard to identify which individuals are undocumented immigrants. No ID cards. Unlike Hong Kong, you can check ID. Trump said, if the mayor of Nuscan, California, for example, can't get the job done, then the federal government will step in and enforce it. That would really solve the problem. Cracking down on riots. Riots and looting. Looters exploit situations. And he ordered a ban on wearing masks. Miller characterized it as a violent rebellion against American law and sovereignty. Take a look. The result was, at night, the riots continued to be very serious. Police cars kept getting set on fire. Let me put it this way. One last time. Why is the problem so serious? It's because 18% of the U.S. population is Latino. Some Latinos support Trump. Who are they mainly? They're mainly Cuban Americans and conservative Catholics who believe in cracking down on the rebellion. But you have to remember, in the first election, Trump got just over 20% of the Latino vote, and in the second, over 30%. So he gained 10% more. That's the reason he won. If, well, the riots get really serious, you're bound to upset 80 or 90% of Latinos. And then you'll lose the election. They make up 18% of the total U.S. population. But Trump still has to answer to the MAGA crowd. Like I said, there are about 12 million undocumented immigrants in the U.S. living within the country. Now we have a clearer picture. Some have been living here for 20 to 30 years. Some of them are Mexican nationals. Don't intend to stay in the U.S. finishing work. They earn their money and go back. Every year, they cross the border back and forth for work. And without these people, a lot of businesses in the U.S. simply couldn't keep running. I'm telling you, if you really scare those people, if they hide, that's a problem. He said it's not just about slaughtering chickens and butchering pork. And also those working in laundromats. They're all undocumented immigrants. Those picking fruit in California orchards. They're all undocumented immigrants too. It's obvious. If you arrest them, no fruit to eat, no pork to eat, no chicken. If you round them all up, that's what will happen.